Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today we're going to be going through our top 5 Week 4 IDP waivers that we're going to be adding.
Hike!
All right, Joe, so let's start off with the first one. We've got defensive end edge rusher Andrew Van Ginkel of the Minnesota Vikings has had a really good start to the season. How much FAAB are you going to be putting down to get this guy? He's currently rostered in about 50% of leagues, 49% to be exact. So he's still out there to be had. So what do you think about Van Ginkel?
Yeah, I've always liked Van Ginkel, even from his days in Miami. He's always, when he's gotten the opportunity to play, he's always seemed to produce. And, he's got a sack in each game here. Robert Flores, in that defensive scheme that the Minnesota Vikings have, just seems to be working. Guys are getting pressure on the quarterback. So, I'd probably, if I need an edge rusher and also need some like sack production, I'd probably be willing to go like 10% for him.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. 5 to 10% sounds good. I mean, he's had a sack in his first 3 games. And you got to remember,
Right.
Andrew Van Ginkel came from the Brian Flores system. I mean, he was in Miami, I believe, when Brian Flores was there. And I want to say, him and the GM drafted him. So there's a lot of familiarity there. We know that the NFL is just like the real world, right? It's all about who you know. So now he's getting this opportunity to really be the starting edge rusher there. He had 61% of the snaps, 41 snaps. The next highest was Jonathan Grenard at 46 snaps. So I think that he is going to be, there is a rotation. We talked about Patrick Jones last week. There are going to be some players that are going to be rotated. Dallas Turner, the rookie, but I think he's going to get his. So I'm not too concerned. Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. All right, Joe, so let's talk about our second player, defensive tackle Devonte Wyatt. He's a guy who I felt like could be on the cusp of breaking out, and it seems like that may be the case. Had 2 sacks against the Tennessee Titans, as well as 3 QB hits. So, Joe, how much FAAB are you putting down for Devonte Wyatt, currently rostered at 15%?
Yeah, it's interesting. You've been talking about this guy, looking for the possible breakout. Definitely could be there. I mean, it's impressive. He had 2 sacks this past week against the Titans. Will Levis does hold on to the ball an awful lot, though. Also had a sack against the Colts the week before as well. I do think he's interesting. He's a deeper defensive tackle if you're looking to, and if you need to, start defensive tackles in your leagues. So I do think he's worth an ad. I'd probably be willing to do like 5% for Wyatt.
Yeah, I think about 5% is what I was thinking as well. My biggest concern with Wyatt has always just been, will he get the playing time? He
Right.
just has been a guy who's been rotating, and he just hasn't gotten enough playing time. Looking at the snaps for this past game, he was the second leading defensive tackle with 29 snaps, so 54% of the plays he was out there. But he is sharing time with Carl Brooks, who's right behind him, and then you also have Kenny Clark in there. So and then they also have Tredero Slayton, I believe is his name. So you got a couple of defensive tackles that are working in the mix. I think you're okay because he's got that potential. He's a guy with a lot of talent coming out of Georgia, I believe. So I like the pick as an upside pick. So I agree there.
Yeah, I do like the next couple of weeks that he's got. Got the Minnesota Vikings this upcoming week here. We saw the Texans being able to get that interior pressure against Sam Darnold and get to him, and then he gets the decimated Rams offensive line the following week. So there'd be some upcoming opportunities for sacks for him.
Next player we're going to be talking about is linebacker Daiyan Henley of the LA Chargers. This was an interesting one, Joe, former 3rd-round pick out of Washington State. Has looked the part recently, had 9 solo tackles, a tackle for loss, and 3 tackle assists. The big thing with the Chargers, we just didn't know who was going to be that starting linebacker there. Junior Colson, who was formerly with Michigan, he's been injured. Then you got Denzel Perryman, who's the veteran. So how much are you spending for Daiyan Henley? Is this a breakout? Should we be spending a decent amount of FAAB to get this guy? Currently rostered in 32% of leagues.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go too crazy for him, but he has shown, 3 weeks of pretty solid tackle production, which is nice to see. I mean, I'd probably be willing to go 5 to 10% for him, just because linebackers can be tricky, and if he's going to continue to get that playing time in the production, he could be worth an ad.
I mean, he played 100% of snaps last week, so 68 total snaps. My thing is, I thought Junior Colson was going to be the guy. I really did. He had familiarity with the defense, with the defensive coordinator Jesse Minter coming over as well.
Yeah,
So I would have thought that he would be the guy, and he just hasn't been. It just hasn't. Honestly, he hasn't been able to be healthy. This might
that's
be
the
more
big
of a
thing. Yeah,
redshirt year. I think about 5 to 10%. It's just tough because I don't know if he'll sustain the job over time. It's one of those risk reward, right? Do you spend more to get the guy? No one. It's kind of like what we talked about this. I think past week, Henry Toto, right? Could his
yeah.
role could be supplanted later on in the year. So do you take the gamble and say he's doing it now? He's looking the part, and if he continues to do it throughout the year, hey, you got to steal. That's my biggest question mark.
I just wonder if Junior Colson is healthy, if Perriman would be the odd man out, just because he's more of that, just the down the hill linebacker. He doesn't really provide much for you in the coverage game or anything. So, Junior Colson would be more talented than him. I think Henley could just keep being a mainstay there.
Next player we're going to be talking about is safety Chamarri Conner of the Kansas City Chiefs. Not a household name by any means. A guy who I think has really come on the scene for the Chiefs. Had a really good
Yep.
game. Had an interception, 5 solo tackles, 5 assisted tackles. Guy's kind of all over the field. This is only his second season. He was drafted out of Virginia Tech. He was a 4th-round pick. So, Joe, what are your thoughts on Chamarri Conner, currently rostered in 24% of leagues? How much FAAB are you spending to get him?
Yeah, I mean, if you need a safety, I mean, I've liked what I've seen out of this guy the past couple of weeks, and like you mentioned, against Atlanta, he really was all over the field. He potentially had a fumble recovered as well, but turned out to not be a fumble. You saw him have get in the end zone the week before against the Bengals too. So yeah, I mean, he flies all over the field if you need him. I mean, I think you could be somewhat aggressive because I really think like his role is going to be pretty sustained. So I would be comfortable with like 10% for this guy, especially if you're in need of his safety.
Yeah, it's just interesting because they have, Justin Reed, who played 97% of the snaps, 59. And then you got Brian Cook, free safety, 60 snaps, 98% of the snaps. And then you've got Chamarri Conner. So he's kind of playing this big nickel type of
I was going to say
role.
he's in the box more than Brian Cook has primarily been the deep safety, where Connor I feel like has kind of been in the box. They've been blitzing him. He's been more of just more of a utility guy for them.
It's kind of like we are seeing that more often now in today's NFL, where safeties are kind of almost like converted linebackers
Well, I feel
with
like
more range.
I feel like we saw Trent McDuffie play this role last year, but then since they moved to L'Jarius Sneed, they need McDuffie to play the outside, and then it's almost like they're just inserting Connor in what McDuffie was doing last year out of the slot.
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely is interesting, and he's a guy who I really wasn't that familiar with, but he's really popped on
No,
the scene.
yeah, I wasn't that familiar with him to start the season either, but it helped. You can't help but notice him when you watch the Chiefs.
I know, what is it with these Chiefs and finding these late round secondary players who end up coming out of nowhere?
I mean, obviously that's why they felt comfortable with letting L'Jarius Sneed go. I was always like, what are they doing? But they know the roster better than I do.
Yeah, apparently, Joe. Apparently, so our last player is a guy who's been around for quite some time. That's the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu. He's been a playmaker these past 3 weeks. Had an interception against the Eagles. Also had an interception the game before against Dallas, and a forced fumble recovery. Excuse me, against Carolina. Had 7 solo tackles and a tackle for loss to go with that interception against the Eagles. Currently rostered at 36%. He's been in the league for 11 years, Joe. Like I said, this guy has been around for a long time, but the Saints D is playing hard. What are your thoughts on Tyrann Mathieu?
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't go as aggressive for him as I would Connor, just because I feel like the last couple of weeks he's been, turnover dependent. Like the last 2 weeks, he's been able to get an interception. week before he was able to force a fumble, recover a fumble. He hasn't really been getting a lot of tackles, which you'd like to see more tackles out of the safety. But if he is able to keep getting these turnovers, he's going to score you a bunch of points. So I do think he's, worth an ad. I'd probably go 5% on him. But he's more of that deep safety guy compared to a Conner who, gets more box snap and is closer to the ball, which I tend to like more.
It is interesting. I mean, he did play 100% of the snaps. So, I mean, he is a staple in the defense. And honestly, but that's what he's been known for. His calling card as the Honey Badger was making
Right.
those, turnover type plays and really changing the tide on defense. So, it sounds like he may still have the magic left there. So, I think 5% sounds about good.
32 here.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. So, I mean, but there are some safeties who have really been disappointing. So, I think it depends on how prominent safety is in your starting lineup. If you got to start two of them, like in our league, then probably be more of a priority.
Right.
I'm with you. I would prioritize Chamarri Conner over Tyrann Mathieu because I think Conner, I don't know, I just think he's at this stage of his career, I just think he just has more juice.
Yeah, that's what I agree with. And like I said, I always look for guys that are play closer to the ball, get those box snaps, and right now that's definitely Conner.
So that does it for this episode. We talked about our top 5 Week 4 IDP waiver ads. So you better go ahead and get your queue ready to get these players to join your roster. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.